have no responsibility for the current pandemic.
Stop lying!
The rules, protect yourself at all times. Follow my instructions. Keep it clean, touch gloves if you wish, let's do it.
Sweaty palms.
This is so crazy. Like goosebumps.
This is so crazy. I feel so
Nervous. Like, what in the world, man?
The masks, or behind, proper testing, or behind the 6-foot distancing, the 2-meter distance, or behind these shots, right? This technology that has never been used widely. None of that is over. And as Sasha Latifa pointed out this morning, these were military operations, but they were global military operations, right? Every country had exactly the same narrative. I was fortunate to be able to travel during COVID because I had natural immunity, having had it for 2 days. I took ivermectin, I was fine. And so I saw, 2 meters, masks, be afraid, stay at home, lock down, schools closed, businesses tanked. All of that was on a global basis.
But you can tell if someone's lying, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's really important not to be a liar. But you can tell if someone's lying, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie. I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's really important not to be a liar.
I think truth is good for kids. We're so busy lying, we don't even recognize the truth no more in society. We want everybody to feel good. That's not the way life is.
I don't care how you get there. I don't care what you do to get there. The goal is to win.
What time is it?
Game time! Woo!
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Independence Day. It's the 4th of July, and it says it's the 2nd of July on Twitch, and I don't care because I'm staying focused on the biology. I'm not taking the bait on social media. I'm not even trying to make stuff for social media anymore. I'm trying to do it for myself and for my kids on my own website and in my own archive, and I'm doing it because I know it needs to be done. But if you're not doing something to subvert social media, to try and spread this message on social media, you should probably get off. I know there are other messages to spread on social media, but the biggest one should be to get off of social media. And if you're going to use your time on a computer and on the internet, what you ought to be doing is trying to establish your presence on regular, trying to get on a federated type thing. You don't have to be on my soapbox. You can be on Mastodon and any web server around the world that does that. and then get people using that system. It's a way of getting off of their algorithm and start to follow who you want to follow. Because autism spectrum disorder is a myth that's used to make sure that intramuscular injection is never questioned as a methodology, that virology is never questioned as a science, that public health is never questioned as a reason. And the pandemic and gain of function are mythologies that have been tacked on top of it. It's kind of like a 1-2 punch. Everybody that needed to be was set up at the beginning to understand the mythology of autism spectrum disorder and vaccine mythology in a certain way. And then they were all propelled through the pandemic, and now we're out on the other side, and we haven't learned anything. And we're still in danger of teaching this mythology to our children if we don't learn the truth. And that's really the reality of it. We need to learn the truth. We need to be able to teach our children why the cheese is free on social media. We need to be able to teach our children how the acquiescence to social media allows people to coordinatedly lie to us. And it's a lot like the guy in that subway where he's faking the stopping and the starting of the train, but it allows hundreds of people to perform that act and make you participate in something that's an absolute illusion. Biology is the way out, and Gigaohm Biological is the biology that so far they seem to ignore. I'm very happy to be here. It is Friday, and I'm very glad for that, because after this stream is over with, I will be chilling. I will be chillaxing. I will be going for maximum chill factor. It's going to be a nice afternoon. The gym isn't open. I've taken a few days. It's too many days. My phone has this incredible lack of red dots on the calendar, and it's driving me bananas. Shout out to HoustonTonicITS.com and Houstonic Live. Love that guy. And shout out to the Biology Phenom Substack about the murder and manslaughter in Scotland. Please share it, because it will shock Americans, and then Americans might think, well, what the hell did they do here? Americans might wake up to the fact, if they see it, how awful it is and how obvious it is at this Substack and in those videos and in those testimonies. Maybe Americans will think again about maybe we need to figure out what the truth is, and maybe social media is not like these sunglasses, but rather Gigaohm is like these sunglasses. If you allow me or someone like me or Mark to help you approach social media the right way, don't worry. I think we can pull our kids out. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like an early COVIDsurvivors.com bumper sticker for your car or water bottle, if you'd like a Gigaohm Biological Biology's the Way Velcro back patch, of which I still have like 190 of, and I ordered 200 of them. So seriously, somebody send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Dr. J at P.O. Box 802, Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, 15102, and let me send you a few stickers and see where you can put them. Anyway, this is a message from an American in the back of his garage in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands those stickers came from somebody we know that I think V's Bees will put in the chat. Look at how the bird stays focused. You see this bird, this particular bird, watch him stay focused. Oh man. So what we try to do at Gigaohm Biological is stay focused like these birds. I don't know what kind of bird this is. I'm not a real big bird fan. I don't know anything about birds. But I think this is a fish-eating eagle of some kind. And this bird is focused. And he's focused on the biology in front of him. He's focused on the task at hand, and we need to do that as well. And social media is designed exactly. If this eagle was trying to catch his food on social media, he'd never catch a fish, right? And so I think that's the way you need to realize social media is being used against us. And quite frankly, we need to get good at surfing it so that we can get our kids good at surfing it. And the only way to get good at surfing social media is to understand what it is. Understand how the advertising works, the subtle messaging, the coordinated lying across platforms and podcasts. you're not going to be able to see how amazing the illusion is if you're not aware that Sam Cedar is scripted by the same people that are scripting Brett Weinstein and the Rubin Report, and also Tim Pool. Now, if you've been here for a while, you're at the top of the wave. We haven't always been surfing as well as we're surfing now, but yes, we are doing it good because we stay focused on the biology. It works if you don't take their bait on social media, and loving your neighbors is a great idea because then you got people to sit around the campfire with. You got people to barbecue with. You've got people to borrow sugar from. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gigaohm Biological, where RNA cannot pandemic intramuscular injection is dumb, transfection is a crime, and the population pyramids are real. I'm kind of a Star Trek fan. I've always kind of been a Star Trek fan. I don't mind all that stuff. Sci-fi in general, I think, is really interesting because it sparks the imagination. I'm going to let you in on a really big secret. I was also a really good dungeon master back in the day. I used to be able to run a hell of a campaign. And I'm not ashamed of that. It's one of those things where you realize right now, in the current place that we're in, one of the things that they are destroying in our children is their imagination. And I can see it happening in my own house, and it's hard to get a handle on what to do about it, especially if the only person that is available to do anything about it is you. So if you're working at home, or worst case scenario, or, obviously what most people are doing is they're working outside of their home. So when their kids are at home on summer vacation and they're occupying their time with Roadblocks or Fortnite or whatever the latest garbage is that's on that screen, inevitably you have this problem where you can say that we had this when we were kids, and I watched the A-Team, and I got up in the morning on Saturdays and watched cartoons from like 6:30 in the morning until 10. But social media is just different. Social media is just different. And I hope that anybody who's watching this show has already become aware of their own habits and their own vulnerabilities on social media, and how easy it is to create the illusion of consensus that there are a bunch of people who agree about something, and getting sucked into something like that can be as innocent as buying a cheap thing from somewhere that nobody bought before but you, to actually participating in the slow dissolving of our sovereignty and our slow transition to experimental animal status. I'm very excited to be here, as I said, because this is it's the 4th of July. It's a great day in America. It's going to be a great day in Pittsburgh. And I don't know what we're going to do today, but we're probably going to grill out. I'm probably going to drink a beer. I'm definitely going to sit in my front yard and burn a fire and watch people drive by and wave the American flag and say hello, because it's just a good day. There are lots of people down the street who are going to shoot fireworks, and we can see those through the trees. It's nothing. Let me just say that the house that we were renting to own during the pandemic, that we lost as a result of the pandemic, was a house on 3 acres on the top of a hill that directly overlooked essentially the park, although you couldn't see it because there were too many trees, overlooked the park where the local pool was, and also where they shoot the fireworks from. So the fireworks exploded, to a certain extent, directly above our house. And then if the wind was right, the still almost burning embers would land in our backyard. And we had this beautiful slope behind our house that led to a campsite, and another 10 acres that was technically owned by one person, but that person didn't even live in the county. And so there was a lot of wild woods behind my house too. It was arguably one of the best houses in Pittsburgh, probably, given that it was like a 100-year-old rock house with a stone roof. It would probably be a little cramped for us right now, but in a lot of ways, that place was ideal for the pandemic. And so I can only assume that somehow or another I got tremendously lucky by that starting to occupy that house and thinking that we would have it for the 3 years when we most needed it, and then somehow or another found ourselves on the opposite side of the city, not so happy about where we are, but in a house that's perfect for this work that I'm doing now, and closest to one of the nicest basketball gyms on earth. And I've found my way back to basketball, and I have high hopes that I'm going to be essentially a professional athlete, because I will be teaching biology, not basketball. Nobody needs to learn that from me. I will be teaching biology on a basketball court very soon, and if I can turn that into something worthwhile, this will have all worked out in a really weird and odd and beautiful way. So I'm very, very excited about being where we are, and luckily being in America, because I do think in the next 5 or 6 or 10 years, there's going to be a lot of world history that none of us can really predict, although a lot of us have some good guesses. And the continued deterioration of life in Europe, I'm not sure how that's going to go. I don't know if there are certain countries that are going to go bad, but I do know that where we live right now in Pittsburgh and everything, knock on wood, is okay. And things are going okay. And that means that we have enough stability on this raft to try and make things go better. And so that's my goal for the next, 6 months or so. And then we're going to see where we are in 6 months. And that's worked already for 6 years. It is in July of 2020 that I first found myself able to succinctly say that they were misconstruing a background with spread. And the way that I explained it at the time in July of 2020 was that there are lots of viruses, and there are lots of SARS-like viruses that have been found and reported over the last 20 years, and we've never really monitored them. And in a way, I was kind of describing it correctly. I was just still using their nomenclature for that background. SARS viruses, MERS viruses, coronaviruses, flavoviruses, whatever. All those things, they all are essentially at this stage in time, because of the Human Genome Project and the prevalence of the use of recombinant DNA and also the use of PCR, all these things ever are genetic signals in the background. And so they can call them different things, and they can claim that they have these different specificities and this different fields of understanding and, different degrees of fidelity of understanding and these different things. But the bottom line is that now modern virology always starts with a sequence. So all they have to do is tell you they found something, and they can start working on it. So if DARPA wanted Peter Daszak to start working on what they thought would be a self-transmitting RNA bioweapon, then they could take a guy like Peter Daszak, claim that he found the sequence, make a impossible to otherwise find pure and large quantity of that DNA, and put it in places and see what happens. And that's the extraordinary fact that leaves people like that guy in the big square there, Mike Eden, in kind of a shitty position, because the bottom line is, I didn't put the green screen down. I'll do that now if you don't mind. This doesn't take very long. It's just a magnet. That's what leaves Mike Eden in such a weird position, because the deal is that Mike Eden knows how protein biologics are made. Mike Eden is a self-confessed pharmaceutical executive and pharmaceutical scientist who's sold a couple companies and worked for Pfizer for 20 years and worked on respiratory disease. And so it's important that we're especially scrutinous of his position, because he has all of the credentials essentially to be an insider that Robert Malone does, just from a different angle. Has the same credentials to be an insider as somebody like Jonathan Engler or Nick Hudson or even Denny Rancour, all of whom have expertise which should suggest that they should understand some things like, a population pyramid. And yet all of them seem to not be able to pick up on that even after 3 years of having it badgered into their head. And so their purposeful ignoring of the story that we've been telling, the story that we're trying to push, all puts them in jeopardy in terms of being outed as part of the same team that's curating a worst case scenario story and making sure that nobody comes to understand the real goal here was to get everybody to accept PCR as a diagnostic, to accept sequencing of remnants as just something that's done. And there's lots of companies that buy remnants for that. We don't care. And to get people to ignore the murder, and to make sure that people didn't understand that this expected rise in all-cause mortality was going to cause a rise in numbers, was going to cause a rise in hospital deaths, was going to cause a rise in old folks' homes deaths. And so they had an opportunity to use it. And this is not an idea that's so sophisticated that somebody like Mike Eden doesn't understand it, especially since I've told it to him before. He's been on my stream with Paul Alexander, where we talked about the fact that the only place that you can make these large quantities of pure DNA, which are perfect PCR positives, is at a pharmaceutical level. Pharmaceutical companies have the possibility of making grams of DNA. It's harder to do that in an academic lab. That's why they have this commercial process down to a science. So the only thing necessary to do modern virology is this recombinant DNA technology of growing mass quantities of plasmids in bacteria that was basically honed to a fine science by the prerogatives of the Human Genome Project. That's why genome collector Craig is involved. That's why NATO scientist Jessica Rose is involved. That's why the former research and development director of the Human Genome Project involved. That's why the guy from Gavi's involved. That's why a glyphosate scientist from MIT is involved. That's why a country doctor who's an expert on anthrax vaccines is involved. That's why a guy like this who was selling biometric surveillance to New York prisons in 2019 is involved. That's why this guy who has Ditra and Domain and Zika and Ebola and Inovio and Amerithrax and all kinds of other shit on his resume, including transfection about 40 times, is involved. And so it gets to be tough after a while if Mike Eden has run in circles with Sasha Latipova repeatedly, has written Substacks that are critical of me, calling me JJ like all these other people do, even after he was on my stream and I explained to him how this was done. And he had no commentary for it, even though, of course, you remember that Sukrit Bhakti said he didn't disagree with anything I said. It's just that now that we know that RNA can't pandemic, we shouldn't talk about it anymore. These people were all put in place. And if you watch the Oracle Films interview of Mike Eden, I'd like you to go and take notes and watch it. See if you can come away with an opinion that Mike Eden is okay. There's already a couple Substacks written about it. There's already notes on it, and highlights is already done on one of these anonymous Substacks or another. And so it's all out there already. I suggest that over the weekend, if you're bored, you spend some time and take some notes and see if you can hear him calling these people out by name. Calling these people out by name. And not only calling them out by name, but specifically sticking to the script. Because again, he's kind of saying there are no viruses. And he says it by saying that these people do great work. And he loops Stefan Lanka in with all of these people, and that's really an illusion. Because Stefan Lanka has a very specific set of objections and experiments that he's credited with. Stefan Lanka was also, I believe, questioning HIV. These people were not so elegant. These people were not so precise. And I think, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, what condemns these people as traitors is that in 2023, under the auspices of being a staff scientist at Children's Health Defense, under the auspices of Brian Hooker and Mary Holland, I approached these people and explained to them that virology was a fraud, but not quite the way you're saying it. There may be viruses, there may not be viruses, there are definitely exosomes, and there are definitely phages. But what I also know for sure is that pharmaceutical companies and any other interest like that, including an academic interest, would have the facilities necessary to produce large quantities of pure DNA. And large quantities of pure DNA are the perfect PCR positive. Large quantities of DNA are how they start these virology experiments. And so I argued that these people could join forces with CHD, and together they could explain how infectious clones is the fraud, because infectious clones is just transfection and transformation. And they actually threw it out. They asked for citations. They said infectious clones are fake. You don't know what you're talking about. Send us the papers. And then they did a 5-person talk that said that I was a shithead and didn't really answer any questions at all, because they're all part of the same show. I'm sorry. The problem with them and the problem for them is me, because I am perhaps the only person who has had sufficient interaction with all of them, because they have thrown them all at me. That's why I can say that Jessica Hockett and Nick Hudson and Jonathan Engler didn't even start working on me until 2023, because in 2022 I presented 3 times to their organization, Panda, and they didn't post any of those lectures anywhere on their Rumble channel. And then in 2023, these 3 people started working on me right before the book was done, trying to get me to write a virology review with them and stuff. And Jessica Hockett turns out to be one of the biggest liars in America. I don't know what her real name is. Maybe it's Faber. I've heard that before. But these guys from South Africa and from England are nasty. This is a retired pharma exec who got a law degree in his retirement. This is an actuary who's never told you about population pyramids and about how there was an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality across the West. This guy has never said that. And of course, she hasn't either. But she's been able to have multiple interactions on Substack with Pierre Corey, the oxygen fraud in New York. The guy who was the medical witness for the George Floyd trial that said he definitely suffocated from the cop.
And then there are people who have inspired a lot of thought for me. People like JJCouey, who's regarded by some people as sort of this kind of savant or idiot or something whose ideas are just too terrible and too incompatible with the biology that they learned. And in many ways, they are.
So the key to see is that whenever anybody mentions me, they don't actually say what the idea is. They don't actually say what I've said, and he doesn't say it there. JJCouey's take is pretty good, but what is JJCouey's take, and why is it different than everybody else's? And of course, his interviewer, who is none other than Germ Warfare in that particular video, his interviewer is a shithead too. And they got caught on Twitter when I did my interview with Germ Warfare. Germ Warfare said it would take him 3 weeks to release the interview, but he doesn't cut anything. He just needs to get it up to production levels and stuff. And then in the first week before he released the video, Nick Hudson actually tried to start tweeting that intramuscular injection is dumb. And I quoted it on Twitter, and then I said that this is stolen from the Germ Warfare podcast, because the first time I ever said this was on the Germ Warfare podcast. I never said it so clearly. So it's pretty remarkable. Sorry. Because they walked right into my trap. And I'm not some kind of master, intelligence agent. I'm just a guy who suspected that somebody who says that he has wine with Nick Hudson every couple weeks in South Africa, if he's going to interview me, and then says it takes 3 weeks to release the video, I wonder if I say something clever, if somebody will try and steal it. And sure enough, Nick tried to steal it. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Nice. So anyway, not to whine about that. I don't care about it. I don't care about the stealing if they stole something real. Nick Hudson and went with it. If Nick Hudson said, yeah, I heard it from Jay, or yeah, I heard it from Germ Warfare, but he must have heard it from Jay because he just interviewed him. I don't care. keep saying intramuscular injection is dumb, but he didn't keep saying it, you see? That's the problem. If he kept saying it, eventually somebody would remind him that, yeah, I guess you got that from Jay. But that's not what he did. And he's never said it again, because if he did, then he would be spreading the truth that's not in this script. And remember that Nick Hudson of Panda was off the coast of Turkey in a boat with Robert Malone and his wife and a bunch of other of these dissidents for a whole week in 2022. This is a coordinated group of liars that's had several international meetings. He was also on stage in Romania at the end of 2023 in November with Steve Hatfield standing in front of him. Nick Hudson is one of the worst actors in this joke. I mean, all you really have to do is have a bunch of organizations that are dissonant organizations, like I've shown in that group, and make sure that all the good ideas get sucked up and stolen and obfuscated by the front-facing dipshits, and it's all fine. You know, Nick never promotes any of the ideas that he gets from Panda as who taught him them or who said it. You know, even though during the pandemic, they were inviting people like 3 times a week. You know, he just tweets because I'm smart. I tweet because I'm smart. That's how he tweets all the time. So it's unfortunate that it's probably true that somehow or another these people have been absorbed into the narrative control apparatus. Is he a coerced guy? Is he unfortunate? You know, it's like he upset. Like, I didn't expect it to last this long. You guys have really screwed this up. This is the last video I'm going to do. Because there's a couple times when he said it was the last video he's going to do. Now, this one's the final warning. It's all about digital ID. And so, again, this guy who has all this biological background, you're going to see it. He doesn't teach anything about the biology. He doesn't clear anything up. He is not very specific about anything, even though he has the requisite knowledge to be very specific and to teach it well, like I try to do every day. But no, he's not going to do that because that's not in his script. I think he's on Robert Malone's script just because, you know, that one really important video of his, look at what's on the microphone. It's a CHD microphone recording him in London while he walks down the sidewalk. It's pretty obvious to me that we're in big trouble. These guys should make it pretty obvious to you that we're in big trouble. The scripted bullshit that we talk about all the time. Now, wouldn't it be funny if around 2017, around that same time when Brett Weinstein's finding his stride in March and, you know, getting in trouble with the students, you know, in 2017, wouldn't it be funny if this guy also kind of had his start and got promoted and got sort of his first, big public appearance in 2017. His Wikipedia is really interesting. Just like in the article. So again, remember, Brett Weinstein just kind of pretended to take this guy to task, but he's not really taking anybody to task if you first don't look into his image and his track record and what he does. And his image and his track record is completely manufactured. This is one of the most fake pseudo-Americans on social media right now. This is a guy whose Wikipedia says he was raised in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, before moving outside of Chicago in northern Indiana. Supposedly he grew up in LaPorte, Indiana. I grew up for a little while in Michigan City, Indiana, and my dad taught in LaPorte. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, I don't think we actually crossed paths, but if we had, I would have been dressed on a bicycle with a radio strapped to the front, wearing a Cubs batting hat, pretending to be Poncherello. So it would have been an interesting meeting. Anyway, let's see. His parents immigrated from India. So if you read that, normally a Wikipedia reads, Jonathan Couey was born in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. But this one reads, Prasad was raised in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. Now, what's interesting, if you go to that previous page over here and you look at this article, if you read this article, it uses exactly the same wording. He was raised in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. His parents immigrated from India. So They don't actually say he was born in Cleveland, Ohio, because he wasn't. And so rather than just being honest and straightforward about who he is as a man, he's lying about it. He's being a little cheeky with it. Now, what I find interesting is to think about the timeline that we're on and the fact that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in 2025 is head of Health and Human Services Secretary. Marty McCary is the head of the FDA, and he's not even an American citizen, like he's a dual citizen. And this Prasad guy was on social media. And so if you go to his Wikipedia page, you will see that, can you see my arrow here? He was appointed on May 6th, 2025, made director of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. Now, CBER is most certainly the branch of the FDA that would have the authority to go back to 2020 and figure out what happened, especially with regard to the 220 EUA-granted PCR diagnostic tests. That's a lot of different products. That's a lot of unregulated remnants. And where did they go? And who of those FDA EUA-granted products were used at big campuses like Ohio State or Indiana or Illinois, where there could be as many as 40 or 50,000 students subjected to regular testing? And then where did those remnants go? And were the tests that they were using even valid, or were they just to create the remnants in the first place? And that could all be investigated by the FDA if the director and the head of CBER was interested in doing that. But of course, these two cancer biologists, cancer doctors, are not interested in that. They are interested in faster approval. They're interested in cancer drugs. They're interested in the farmers market that they have in the square outside of the FDA building. These people are complete frauds. Now, it would be hard for me to say that without very much evidence, but I think that the last 5 years on the internet is littered with evidence. Now, if you remember what I just showed you on his Wikipedia, this man was appointed to his post on May the 6th of this year, and on April 23rd, he did this podcast.
And VP, we are motherfucking live. I have to get the motherfucking out quick, just so people know. Don't play
what kind
this
of show
for
this
your kids.
is.
This is that kind of show.
That kind of show.
You look like Elon Musk at a Trump rally.
We're gonna go to Mars, my friend. Shout out to Timothy Olivier. I think he gave me this jacket a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm having a bad hair day, so I had to put a hat on. You ever have it? You ever have those?
Every day is a bad hair day for me, man. Like I was born with bad hair. You know, actually, when I had hair, it was bad.
Oh really?
Yeah, it was.
I'm telling you that 1 week before he was appointed to the FDA, he did this podcast.
He has decent hair. But like mine it became this crazy dense thing. I used to tell the woman to thin it, and I would pray, like, could it please get thinner? And I got my prayer. Yeah.
One day you're like, oh God.
One day I was like, damn it.
This prayer has come true.
Prayer is, why was God real? All this time I just assumed he wasn't. Or they, actually, God's pronouns are they.
Oh, is it they,
yeah,
them?
yeah, they, them. Those. Yeah.
Well, those are now pronouns not allowed in Department of Defense.
So they got rid of pronouns there?
And I think that the press secretary, if the reporter has pronouns in their bio, they won't reply. They won't. They won't reply.
You know, it's so funny. Like sometimes these guys blow people up and sometimes these guys blow people up. So the left had their way for how many years? Now the right's doing their thing. It's just reaction, counter-reaction, reaction, counter-reaction.
You have to see that we are under attack. America has been subverted. The FDA is absolutely useless. And we have traitors at the top. Posers at the top, people who have been told since maybe 2017 that we're going to make something of you, we're going to use you, just like they told Brett Weinstein. And now we are 8 years later, and this is where we are. 8 years later, and this is where we are. 1 week before he's appointed to the FDA, where he becomes some kind of podcast host, I guess, and gives a couple, good presentations because that's what he's been practicing for the last 10 years. This fraud, foreign-born fraud, is at the head of the only agency in America that could reverse the ridiculous behavior of our society for the last 5 years by going back and reevaluating what they gave EUAs to and whether or not any of those products were worth what they did. Because if they didn't do anything, then we have a very big problem on our hands. There was an awful lot of fraud going on. And more importantly, the whole idea of PCR as a diagnostic, which is still just an accepted thing. There's no more regulation of it. Because it's, these products come out and they're not supposed to be the only diagnostic. It's also supposed to be combined with the doctor's, observations of the patient, yada, yada, yada. So they're not really a high fidelity diagnostic. They're not claimed to be. There's nothing that says it on the box, but the doctors are using it that way. You heard Mary Talley Bowden say it in the interview that she did with me 3 years ago. Well, now I have one in my office that does 17 different viruses.
That's the world of duality,
swings. Yeah,
as we
swing.
say in the spiritual industrial complex, or sick. Well, look at all these comments already. It got thinner. I don't know what that means, Sophia. Are you talking about? Are you like from Silence of the Lambs? She's like, it gets thinner or it gets the hose again. Man, it's been a minute though.
It's been a long time. How many months has it been? We were just having dinner. The show was a surprise.
It was a side hustle from dinner because we were like, let's hang out. And we, contrary to popular belief, Vinay and I are friends and we hang out. We
hang out.
Don't necessarily want to make shows all the time.
We don't always record what we're saying.
That's right, because we would go to jail.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, and at least be canceled. But
there can't be a record of every conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, Ashley likes your jacket. She says, I feel the bad hair days. My hair is so thick. See, you have thick hair too.
It is very thick and poofy. So sometimes it doesn't.
You do yoga, right?
They're using a very expensive microphone that actually has a two-way condenser there, so it's like got this side and the other side it's like made for a conversation. So it's a very nice mic. That's why they're sitting so close together too. They don't realize they don't need to be quite that close to the condenser, but they do need to be about that close. A little less maybe, but
I do. That's what keeps me so flexible.
You look like one of those guys that you see on like a National Geographic.
You can hear they kind of balanced it so that if they're facing the camera, it's fine. But when they face each other, they're actually overloading it. You can hear it clip a little bit.
Documentary
in the loincloth.
Yeah, in the loincloth with like you can contort into all these. Can you do any of that stuff?
I can do a fair bit, but I don't think.
Also using an autofocus camera, which works if there's only one thing to focus on, but not if you have the face recognition and there's two faces and it keeps going to the background and front. Ken, what we're dealing with here is incredible arrogance. They know that they're going to win because they've been winning for the last 5 years. Everything they say wins. They get in newspaper articles like they were promised. They're getting all the views like they promised. He loves it.
I think I'm the most flexible person. I think my advantage is probably upper body strength.
Oh.
Because a lot of people who do yoga some of the best people are women, of course.
Right.
Women are usually like lower body strength through the roof, but upper body strength is.
So what kind of poses are you typically strong at with upper body then?
I could hold plank for several minutes. We should do a live
plank off. Oh my God, dude! Was that a video? Was that a movie with John Travolta? Plank off.
Plank off.
Oh my God, that should be. Okay, yeah. So you can do planks. That's good. I realize if I don't look at the camera, the focus is it's face detecting. And it sees side face, and it's like I don't know what to do. So at least I have to keep staring at the camera.
See, AI is not as good as it needs to be.
It doesn't have eye.
It doesn't have eye.
It just has A.
A lot of people don't have eye.
Yeah,
real people.
A lot of
the eye is the part we've been looking for.
Let's launch into that. It's funny because we have a different regime now running health and human services and healthcare, and people are saying like it's all very much on political lines. Like people who hated the response to COVID are rejoicing. People thought
like me.
Yeah,
Let's
people
not forget.
like the VP.
Yeah.
And people like me. See how cocky he is? He already knows. Because he already knew back in 2020 that he had the chance, that he was auditioning. And this guy probably thinks he was auditioning too, that they just chose his friend, but that's pretty much a win for him. That's where we are. Jay Bhattacharya, the same thing. He was on Robert Malone's script. That's why he told me 3 times in person to stop naming names and specifically stop naming Robert Malone's name. That's why Mary Holland of Children's Health Defense told Brian Hooker to fire me because of the 1-minute section in my in my December 22nd podcast where I questioned whether Robert Malone was really a supporter of CHD and Robert F. Kennedy or not. And that was still at a time when I thought Robert F. Kennedy was a good guy. This is a disaster for them because I can explain succinctly why they are all frauds. And it sucks for them because I'm in Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book and there's no way to explain it any other way. Why the hell is my name in that book? And not Charles Rixey, and not Kevin McKernan? Why the hell am I in the index? Why am I in the cast of characters? Why do I have quotes in that book that say they wouldn't even need a virus? Because it's the truth. And maybe because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is just a tool, and so they didn't realize that I got it in. Why is the Sina Bavari and Alison Totura paper in that book, and nobody realizes that that's an admission in and of itself? Because they're all on a really shitty script, and most of them probably aren't aware of how shitty the script is. They're just really happy they got a job at the FDA.
And I actually don't care at all. It's very strange. Like my whole set of belief structures has kind of just been like, yeah, I don't know. Not a fan of RFK. I've said that publicly. But what I think we could talk about is where is the actual intelligence in general on either political side in terms of doing science? Let's just take vaccine. So everybody's talking about now, okay, measles is happening.
Right to the hard stuff.
Go right to the hard stuff. Because you can talk about your moral beliefs around these things and, oh my God, there's conspiracies of this, or, we should, mask everybody or, give every infant child a COVID vaccine. Or we could actually go, well, how would you actually design a trial or actually look at this to see what should we do?
That's a good question. So which vaccine should we talk about? I think a fall COVID-19 shot, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, what I would do is I would say...
what's the current recommendation, by the way?
The last year's recommendation by a gentleman named Peter Marks, who's currently probably shopping his CV around a few companies.
I got a CV.
You got a CV.
He wants to be my gaffer.
Is he going to work for Moderna or Pfizer or both or all of the above? Well, it was based on, first of all, he picked a strain to target based on an analogy to purchasing milk. Oh. So, obviously it was very scientific there. He's like, we could go after this strain or that strain, but when I go to the milk case, I like to get the most recent jug of milk. So he picked
that's what he said?
That's what he said. Yeah, that was and that is the strength of the recommendation.
So imagine if we managed HIV that way, it would just be like the slogan would be "Got AIDS,"
and
that would be it.
Got AIDS.
So that's disturbing, but okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, anyway, so they it's been a while since I talked about these topics or even cared.
Now, if you really see it as a script, it then becomes very interesting that he brings up AIDS of all things. If you really see it as a script, they were just talking about measles, but now he went and jumped with AIDS. That's because he knows that's something that needs to be hit. And what's being hit there? AIDS is real. That's what they just said and agreed on. AIDS is real.
About these
that's the thing that I just don't care.
Okay. It's been a while since I talked about it.
Yeah.
I mean, last year recommendation was, of course, the booster starts when you're 6 months old.
Yeah.
You got to get it in early, right?
Yep.
Early and often, they say about the boosting these kids for COVID. 6 months to all ages. Okay. And it was a vaccine that had no randomized controlled trials powered for any clinical endpoint. So we don't know it reduces.
So he's saying no randomized controlled trials powered for any clinical endpoint. So again, he's kind of finishing his audition to join the RFK team because, no placebo-controlled trials is one of their shtick. That's Aaron Siri's shtick for the last 5 years.
Catching COVID or getting severe COVID or anything like that. But I think a sensible scientific solution would be you allow the company some flexibility in what target they want to go after. Mm-hmm. I don't think that has to be proscribed by FDA.
Okay.
We got a lot of heat for having to telling people, not telling people the target, but companies should be a little bit free to either go after sort of a parent strain of it or the most recent strain. And then companies should be said, run a randomized trial September-ish, August, September-ish, when the air conditionings are blowing, because air conditioning can spread it, apparently. And power your trial for reduction in hospitalization due to COVID. And then the first thing they'll say the company stats guy is like, well, how big that trial going to be? And they'll be like, oh, you want to include the 6 months old? And they're like, yeah, sure, why not? They're like, oh, then trial will be 10 million people. And I'm like, okay, now, because the event rate is so low.
Yeah, right.
So then they're going to say, okay, no, why don't we target the elderly? Why don't we go after 65 or 70? I was like, oh, target the elderly? That's an interesting. So you're saying focus protection? Oh, yeah. How about a little focus protection? Like, oh, that sounds good. Okay, so let's go after 65 or let's.
Do you actually believe he would ever wear that baseball cap outside? Or is he just wearing it right now so that he can look like an American?
Say 65 with comorbidities or 75, and then they'll say maybe the same.
I see his current outfit as a lot like how Steve Bannon dresses. Steve Bannon is a complete fraud. His I'm a working man with a Carhartt jacket and 3 pens is the biggest joke. The only reason why he buys Carhartt shirts is because he's such a fat ass. That's probably the only reason why he wears them. And because he thinks that it makes working class people identify with him. He's such a fraud.
Sample size should be like something like 20,000 or 15,000 or 30,000, depending on the event rate. And then they'll run the study. And then the study can accrue the 10% of Americans who want to.
Think about the guy who's sitting at the FDA on those podcasts now with his fancy socks and his fancy shoes. Do you really think Professor at Stanford of oncology has a hat like that in his repertoire? Come on.
Participate in such a study, if there's even that, because I think now it's become so polarized. There's huge chunks. I wouldn't enroll in the study, to be honest with you, because I'm not worried. But they'll run their study and then they'll get approval if they have a positive endpoint. I think that's the scientific way. Like for all drug products, you run a trial. If the trial meets a clinically...
Christy, you can have a Carhartt jacket. I have Carhartt pants. I'm not saying that. I'm saying those people choose that on purpose. It's a disguise. And I know you know. I'm just making sure it's okay. I'm not... that you can have that Carhartt jacket. I think that's cool.
Relevant endpoint, you get drug approval. So that's how I do that one.
Yeah, and what's the chances of that happening?
I don't know, actually. That ball's in Marty's court. We got to bring him back.
We got Marty on the VPZ now, but now he's in power, and we know power corrupts, and absolute power doesn't corrupt at all. Is that the saying?
Marty is like Batman in the third Batman. He's like so above it all. He can give it up at any time and be on the piazza sipping a drink with Catwoman.
Now with Marty, it's going to be a Goldschlager on the rocks.
A Goldschlager?
Or perhaps a peach schnapps. I know Marty's predispositions.
And a bowl of soup.
That's right. Marty.
Yeah, but I think Marty's a good person to put in charge of it. We'll see what happens. But okay, let's talk about another thing. What about if you want to do good vaccine science around safety?
Yeah.
Because I heard they want to do this. I heard the result is coming soon. Well, I don't know about the result.
I hear we're curing autism soon.
I hear they want to study it. And
and it hasn't been studied apparently at all.
Well, okay, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I want to make it.
So autism is real. Autism is real, and it's a complex combination of environmental and genetic factors that brings it about. Just like James Lyons Weiler said, just like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said, there's profound autism, and then there's this other stuff. Autism is real.
A table of all the vaccines and all the autism studies. I think it's been studied many, many times.
Exactly right. That's my point.
But I think a lot of them are MMR. And I think that some of their claims are like, well, what if it's the combo of, it's hard to I want to know exactly the landscape of studies. That's one too. But I think if you really wanted to study it, I wouldn't frame it as a study for autism. I would frame it as we want to study the safety signals of all vaccines, whatever those safety signals are.
Right.
And
So I think it's actually possible that he's just a dipshit. He's just so naive to the idea that vaccines might cause problems. He's such a moron that he's never considered it before. It wouldn't surprise me if he has no kids. I actually think he might be a stooge. And that's what they need. I think Brett Weinstein is also a stooge. And because they're not sophisticated enough to really see the big picture, because they're just gunners, they're just trying to get an A on the test. Even as adults, they still think that there's something like that in the adult world. And it's the approval of their friends or the people that they respect behind the scenes or their dad or whatever. But this is sad. Because what we're teaching at Gigaohm Biological isn't that hard to understand. It's just it just puts into question their fundamental understanding of what it is they do and what it is they think they work on as doctors and as scientists. Because once they understand that the high fidelity understanding that they thought they had isn't true, it starts to humble people. It's sometimes you just got to reject it. And I think that could happen with somebody in the military, for example, who ran into a podcast that made him question the existence of large nukes. That after 20 years of being in the military, assuming that that's the worst case scenario and assuming that that prerogative is real, it might be a real difficult revelation to have that maybe they lied about nuclear weapons. Even if they can make them, they didn't make them. They just told us that they could. Even just considering that thought and being challenged to consider that thought for the first time in your life, even if your conclusion is, nah, I think they made them, is still something that not everybody is ready to do. Not everybody even has the circuitry to do. And so you're in a very nice place on the internet where the majority of the people in the chat have the circuitry to reconsider what it is that they assume in every scenario. And it takes a while to exercise your brain to the point where you can get there. It's not a weakness, it's a strength, where every time you're asked to, you can check all the variables, including the presuppositions of where you are. These guys clearly cannot. I think they've been drafted into a script and told the script, to a certain extent, is going to rope together and neutralize the anti-vax movement. And so that's a noble lie and a noble cause, and he probably was drafted into that task just like Brett Weinstein was probably drafted into that task, that when this pandemic happens, we're going to have useful skeptics that we can use to get us to the end point. And the end point, we're not there yet, because it's like a 9-year plan. And the end point will be the next thing that a test can find. That's what I'm guessing right now, that there's going to be, because PCR testing is not going to be questioned by these people, so it's still a tool and still a way that they can do it.
I think the only way to do it is a prospective data collection. Like, in other words, I do not think that it's possible to take existing data sets and get at any greater truth than what we've gotten. I think if you want to do it, you would say, starting this summer, we're going to take 75 sites and literally collect tons of data going forward on anyone getting vaccine a month later and things like that.
So that's absurd, right? One of the things that they could do, that CHD could have advocated to do already 10 years ago, or I guess it would be 8 years ago, would be to advocate for the intense inspection of all babies' medical records that die of SIDS. Because if all those babies that die of SIDS have a commonality in their medical records, that would be worth knowing. But no one's ever done that study, especially in the context of vaccination. But again, remember, the idea is to pretend that you are skeptical and you are reasonable. And in so doing, one of the things that they have to do is get everybody listening to accept the presupposition that there are good vaccines. There are just times when it seems like vaccines or a combination of them might result in adverse side effects. But in general, vaccines are good. And that is the assumption that even Mary Holland works under, and has been working under since around 2015, when she came out on Democracy Now! Opposite Paul Offit and started this elaborate decade-long show.
Would your control, or who would be the negative group? Just people who decline?
People who decline, or you could do some time series analysis, like people who get it 1 month later, depending on birthday or something like that.
Because you could examine people who delay vaccines. They don't like the schedule. They think it's too packed. They delay it. Or how many of them are getting sick?
Well, we've already done that study. The CHD had that data already in 2017 from Paul Thomas, and they also had data from other doctors' offices that they never really bothered to break down and work on, where just those kids had less doctor visits, less allergies, less. And so it's a hamster wheel. Their audience is on a little different part of the wheel. They're a little behind us or a little ahead of us. It doesn't matter, because the rungs are all going to come back again.
how many of them
or
are
even comparing
having-
a kid who gets a vaccine at say 6 months of age against a 5-month-old kid for at least the next month,
I really think for at least the next month, you see, I really think they're naive because they're almost there. And they'll never get there now. But this is evidence that they are naive. They're so cocky because they already know he's got the job. They're so cocky that they just talk off the cuff and almost get there and say, it would be interesting if they just looked at kids who get vaccines at 6 months and, the month after or so. Ooh, that was almost too close for comfort, right? But you can see how naive he is. And they put him back on script. Trust me, they'll get him right back. That's why it's
like
all
somebody who's just below
Just
or
on
above
the
the cutoff.
Yeah.
But I think what would
so
be,
it gets worse.
to me,
It gets worse. You can watch this. It's from April 23rd, 2025. It's their last live that they did. The other thing that's kind of scaring me is that there seems to be a projection of hopelessness. On our side, the conservative side, we even have international politicians that are being promoted by X and being promoted by this group of bought out people on Rumble and on YouTube, like Jimmy Dore, who I've met in person and gave an annotated Wuhan cover-up book to him with a letter in the front cover saying, these people are lying to us. There is no pandemic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and explain stuff in the margins of the book. I spent a lot of time because when he came to Pittsburgh, I took pictures with him and his wife and gave him the book and was really excited. Nothing. Instead, he yesterday promoted this German lady who I'm sure is on Robert Malone's script.
Another country is going to step in and put a stop to this, right? To the censorship, to this denying fundamental rights, and just taking the path, downright into totalitarianism.
And so her job is to announce the plan while not telling you that there was an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality across the West that they sculpted using manslaughter and lies. I told that to Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore knows that they're lying about that in order to trick people into getting the shots. That's why he got vaccine injured, and he's not doing anything about it. Frickin' Americans were murdered by opioids and by pandemic protocols in hospitals and in care homes so that Jimmy Dore would be scared enough to take the shot. And Jimmy Dore doesn't have the guts or the balls or the brains to speak out about it. Instead, he just promotes whoever he's told to promote and collects his money.
But if it's happening in every single Western democracy, who the heck do you think is going to come and bail us out? There isn't going to be anyone coming this time. It's not going to happen.
She's giving you the warning. She's telling you right now it's not going to happen. It's not that dissimilar to Mike Eden, who's telling you that the digital ID is going to happen. The only way you're going to get out of this is by not taking the digital ID. But the way that they're going to get you to take the digital ID is they're going to require it on social media. We've already been told this 3 years ago by some guy by the name of Jonathan Couey in the back of his garage. We've got to get our kids off of social media because our kids are in danger on social media from the anonymous accounts. And so then they're going to require citizens to have ID. Or maybe they'll have special accounts with special privileges because they turned in their ID. They're verified. That's all they have to do. And now our children will take a digital ID, even if dad's being my dad's a pretty backwards guy. He doesn't have a digital ID, so he's not really on the internet. He only streams on this peer tube that he does himself. My dad's a dork. But I got a digital ID. I'm on Facebook and everywhere. That's how it's going to be. And they're just announcing it and getting paid to announce it because they've got no alternatives. He's on YouTube and Rumble doing and reading sponsorships for shit's sake.
Right now, we have a special guest with us, Christine Anderson. She's a German politician who has served as a member of the European Parliament since 2019. She's representing the Alternative for Germany Party, the AfD. She was formerly an activist with the Pegida movement movement. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and became a member of the AFD in 2013, later serving as the party's group leader at the Limburg-Welberg District Assembly from 2016 to 2018. She's very outspoken. We're really happy to have her here. Please welcome to the show, Christine Anderson. Hi, Christine.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So we've been watching lots of you make a lot of ruckus, which is good for a politician.
I think all of this you see is that the idea is to try to make it seem like there's an international consensus and an international group of people that's who has America in its sights and the controlled demolition of America in its sights. They're going to use Donald Trump. They're going to use the next election. They're going to use the crash of the dollar. They're going to use the price of gold. They're going to use the supply chains. They're going to use it all against us. And these people are going to keep us focused on irrelevant things instead of focused on organizing locally, on teaching our children to get off of social media, and to stop chasing the ghosts that are on social media. He's promoting the ghosts on social media, and he's doing it happily, even though they murdered people in his home country so that he would be gullible enough to take the shot, and that's why he's injured. It's almost like they put a gun to these people's head. Or they say, if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and then your podcast will never take off, and you will get no sponsorships, and you won't be able to book another club.
Going against the establishment and the status quo. And let me just ask you about the AFD.
I'm going to remind you of a song that I haven't played in a little while because somebody said, thanks for reminding me of that song, or there's a new song on my playlist or something like that. I really think this is a great tune, and I really think this guy's a great musician, and I'll tell you who it is afterward. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being a part of this show.
Any minute now, my ship is coming in. I'll keep checking the horizon, and I'll stand on the bow and feel the waves come crashing down, down, down on me. And you say, be still, my love. Open up your heart, let the light shine in. Don't you understand? I already have a plan. I'm waiting for my real life to begin. When I woke today, suddenly nothing happened. But in my dreams, I slew the dragon and down this beaten path, up this cobbled lane, walking in my old footsteps once again. And you say, just be here now, forget about the past, your mask is wearing thin. Just let me throw one more dice, I know that I can win. I'm waiting for my real life to begin. Any minute now, a ship is coming in. I'll keep checking the horizon, and I'll check my machine. It's sure to be that call. Happen soon, soon, oh so very soon. It's just the times are leave, and you say, be still, my love. Open up your heart, let the light shine in. And don't you understand? I'm waiting for my real life to begin. On a clear day, I can see for a long way. On a clear day, I can see. See for a long
It's a very clear day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I can see a very, very long way today. That's Colin Hay, originally from Men at Work, in a solo album. The song is called Waiting for My Real Life to Begin. What an artist that guy is. That voice is just, wow, amazing. Brett Weinstein and his wife are scripted bullshit. I don't know if they're witting or unwitting. Well, they're witting now, but they might have not been in the beginning. But they're definitely scripted bullshitters. I just don't think they're sophisticated enough to understand. And since it's Independence Day in America, and I don't want to wade in this mud for another hour, I've decided to insert an alternative direction for the show for the remaining of the day, in hopes of lifting your spirits and reminding you about what America used to stand for, trying to remind you of how I think of America, what I think of America, and why I think racism in America is kind of silly. It doesn't make any sense. And they're just folding us in on ourselves with this hamster wheel of bullshit. And they're using social media to do it to us. America was something much better than the last few years. Check this out.
Why do people talk about dreams so much in sports? Dream seasons, dream matchups, dream opportunities.
What's it up?
They do it because so much of sports is about imagining what you want things to be like. If only the setting were just right.
It was one of those times none of us will ever forget.
The characters just right.
I don't know anything about Angola, but Angola's in trouble.
The timing just right.
11 Hall of Famers. I don't think you can ever do that again at no point in time.
If only it could all be the way you might have dreamed it up yourself. Training camp began on June 22nd, 1992, in La Jolla, California. And when the gym doors opened, no one was quite sure what to expect, especially the players themselves.
It's a lot of egos in one gym and on one team. Everybody wanted their form to shine and showcase why they were a part of this team.
With all these stars on the team, if it comes down to the last shot, who's going to take the shot?
Me. Everybody in the world has an ego. The only difference between us, we have a reason to have an ego. Every one of us felt like we was a Everybody.
That dude is massive. If you've never seen that guy,
And when practice
he's
started that first
massive.
day, every player seemed to be trying.
You can see it if you see it. It looks like his head is small, but actually his head's not small. His body is just massive. That Karl Malone is no joke. I played at DePaul on their practice team when Steve Howard played. And Steve Howard actually went and sat the bench at the Utah Jazz for a year and a half. And the size of Steve Howard was mind-blowing. Like, he was a big dude. And he looked like a child next to Karl Malone. Karl Malone is one massive man.
Trying to prove just how great they were.
It was a very competitive practice. And I'm thinking, aren't we all on the same team?
Patrick go, I don't want to play with David, I want to play against him. Then you hear Michael say, I don't want to be on Magic's team, I want to play against him.
Every evaluation of Michael Jordan at that time was, he's good, but he's never Magic Johnson. In my competitive nature, I want to use every little bit that I could gather so that I can gain an advantage.
Karl Malone, he's the only guy I would even compare to myself at the power forward position. So I want to prove that I was the best power forward in the world.
Charles. Yeah, he's a great talent. Do I think he's better than me? Hell no. So let's do this. By the time this over with, you're going to be thinking I'm damn good too.
First practice, Barkley drives baseline and Karl Malone jumps up like this. Barkley just dunked on him so hard. It was just an unbelievable play. I felt like, man, I cannot believe that I'm part of this practice.
I bet. I want that
A few days
sweatshirt
later,
right there.
the
I
team had
can't
a
find
chance
it.
to acclimate themselves to playing on the same side.
I've been trying to get one of those
Elliott
big
scheduled
champion
the scrimmage
sweatshirts. I
against a
can't
select
find one.
group of college players, a group thrilled
But I
to
did.
be facing off against their idols.
I was able to find one of the practice jerseys that they didn't use for the other team, right? So they got the same reversible jerseys as them. And after the Dream Team, they were yellow for the away team. So this is a white one. This I got really lucky on eBay. eBay's awesome.
I found out today I might be picking up Magic a little bit full court, so things are just happening for me.
If you don't know the story of this game, please listen carefully because it's awesome.
It really, really makes me happy.
A lot of those people that I've looked up to, Barkley, Malone, a lot of those people talk confidence, and I think it's going to be a good matchup. There's no advantage on either side.
For the college players, it was a chance to see how they'd match up against the world's best. For Coach Daly, it was an opportunity to get his stars to grow into a single unit.
I think we're somewhere between the mentality of an all-star game and trying to come together as a team.
An all-star game, so they're not taking it very seriously, you see?
So we've got to continually work on this.
Daly had been hired for his ability to manage personalities and egos. And when the scrimmage began, it became apparent that his players had left one of their biggest weapons, those egos, somewhere else.
A non-fan would think, well, they're going to go in there and they're each going to want their own ball, and Jordan's going to be hogging the ball, and Magic's going to be dribbling all over the place. Point of fact, it was the exact opposite. They overpassed.
It was like, I don't want to start it off. You do it. And before you realize it, the select team was beating us by 10.
We didn't know how to play with each other. We didn't want to step on anybody's toes or hurt any egos. So these young kids, they were killing us.
We were not into it, and we paid for it. Chris Webber was a man
I thought, boy, that's the guys coming this league. I could get out of here.
That is a compliment. Chris Webber was a man. If that guy's coming into this league, I got to get out of here. Think about Larry Bird saying that about you as a basketball player. That's badass.
Bobby Hurley was dominant.
I did have some success penetrating and collapsing the defense, and our energy, our excitement to play, all those things played in our favor.
Bobby Hurley didn't play 2 seasons in the NBA. Nevertheless, it did expose the one weakness they could have had, which is defending against quick guards.
They were playing great. Then I noticed that Michael Jordan is not playing.
I'm saying something. Chuck, then he said.
That's probably the best basketball coach that's ever lived. Mike Krzyzewski is single-handedly responsible for taking the reins of the USA basketball team after this dream team and kicking people's ass. He's a really wonderful coach. And what's really crazy is that he learned to coach from Bob Knight. Like, talk about America. This guy's America right here. That guy's America. Bob Knight's America. Basketball and the dream team is America.
We're all right. Yeah, we're all right.
Daly watched as his players failed to make up the deficit. And in their first taste of outside competition, the dream team lost.
It's tribalism, but it's tribalism that's based on what soil do you live on and what legal system do you share? And under whose shade do you shelter? If we shelter under the same trees, then I think we might be better off on the same team. So it's tribalism, but it's a special kind of tribalism now that the world is global and we can have friends all over the world that have no bearing on our lives. We can even have friends that we don't even know for sure are real. Then you're damn right it's tribalism. It's soilism.
A story their coach didn't want the press to get their hands on. The teams posed for a picture together, both not sure what to make of what had just happened. But the man in charge may have had the answer.
He threw the game. Chuck threw the game. If you look how much Jordan played and how he subbed guys in, not picking up, not making any adjustments, he knew what he was doing.
It was legit. It felt tremendous, what we were doing that day. They couldn't stop it.
There are kids who believe in Santa Claus too, and the Easter Bunny, and now that they've grown up, I hate to burst their bubble, but it was a game thrown. Not many people would have done it, and he did it.
It was gratifying to Chuck for us to get our butts beat like that because now we had to listen to him.
The next day, training camp ended with a rematch against the college kids. And once play started, everything made sense again.
The tables were turned drastically. We showed them why we are who we are. We pretty much beat them by 100.
They couldn't score. And by the way, Jordan played a lot more that next scrimmage.
Before the Dream Team could play in the 1992 Olympics, they had to qualify. The place to do that was Portland, Oregon, and the Tournament of the Americas. It would be the public's first chance to see the NBA stars together in a game, especially Jordan, Bird, and Magic.
I agree that God can take away people's talent in a heartbeat, but I would just, the reason why I think this is so special is because this dream team inspired kids around the world in a way that made basketball go international in a way that before the dream team it was not. That is absolutely for sure.
Daly had asked all three to be team captains, but Jordan had turned him down.
I knew how much it meant to both of those guys because they never had the opportunity to play on the Olympics. So I'd say, you know what, Chuck, don't worry about me. Let these old dogs do it.
Magic and Bird.
Don't forget, Jordan was already on an Olympic team with Worthy and I don't remember all the guys that were on there, but it was an awesome team.
Weren't just the team's oldest players. They were also the most revered. They had entered the league together in 1979, embarking on a rivalry that had redefined the NBA.
In a lot of ways, America was governed in part by the NBA, with these two guys as rivals, as these two guys as Converse shoe wearers. The whole dichotomy in America between black and white was personified by these two guys for like 15 years. And their rivalry and getting along and playing along to get along was all part of the cohesive nature of the American dream, the idea that we all are just on the same soil and now we're all going to play under the same flag. This was really a very unique period in America's evolution, if you will. One of the best times in America, I would argue, was right after I graduated from high school, right when the Chicago Bulls started winning championships, right when I moved to Chicago and was on my own.
And along the way, their personal admiration for one another had grown.
Magic's just a great basketball player. He's the best I've ever seen, you know. Unbelievable. I don't know what to say.
In 1992, they'd be getting the chance to share the ball. But the opportunity would be coming at the end of their careers. Bird had given his soul to the game. But after so many years, his body was betraying him.
Had back problems. It just gets to the point where you just couldn't play. I mean, you couldn't think, couldn't move, couldn't run. You know, if you can't feel your feet, it's hard to run.
Larry was on the fence because of his back, so I said, man, LP, you gotta play, man. You gotta play. This is our last chance to be together.
Magic would be able to convince his old friend to play.
And then?
But at the start of the 1991-92 NBA season, he was forced to retire after learning he had the HIV virus. Doctors would eventually clear him to play in the Olympics, though that didn't stop fears from swirling.
So everybody learned about HIV from the Dream Team. Holy shit.
There's a lot of players that really didn't want him to play, didn't want to play with him or against him, because nobody knew what disease meant. You know, they say you get a little blood on you, you got HIV, or you breathe on you, you know. I never bought any of that, you know. You just keep going.
You see why I think NBA players might be the people we need to get to learn the truth about the pandemic?
And that's what Irving decided to do, just keep pushing, keep going.
6, 5, three-pointer, yes, oh my!
Magic had made a cameo in the 1992 All-Star Game and had focused his attention on the Olympics, hoping for an encore of a lifetime alongside his old rival.
Our careers were really over, and it was something I thought needed to happen for both of us.
Their debut would take place at Portland's Rose Garden, with their team needing to medal in the Tournament of the Americas to qualify for the Olympics. That seemed like a foregone conclusion to just about everyone, including their first opponents, who were completely in awe before the game even started.
The Cuban team spontaneously drops to its knees as if 12 popes had come by on Easter Sunday. At that point, the idea that this is merely a basketball game has been ripped asunder.
It was a surreal feeling. She's like, dude, we're here to kick y'all behind. And they want to take pictures with you.
I love Charles Barkley.
Magic and Larry come out together, two guys that had saved the league. They wouldn't even be playing this game without those two. And Magic passed the ball, Larry makes the first basket.
Forward backing in, goes to the fadeaway.
I mean, you know, it just didn't get any better than that.
The U.S. was off and running, and the result was a thing of beauty.
Johnson leading the break.
And no one seemed more excited to be sharing the court than the co-captains. Opening night was a smashing success, with the outcome never in doubt.
Bullet from Magic.
And late in the game, fans in Portland decided they wanted a curtain call from a 3-time MVP.
The crowd start cheering, Larry, Larry, Larry.
Crowd reacts to the entrance of Larry Bird, a standing ovation.
And as he'd done so many other times in his career, Larry Bird rose to the occasion.
Jordan with the behind-the-back save. Here's Bird.
Yes. You just knew that Larry Bird was not going to miss that shot.
It was a virtually flawless performance. The final margin of victory was 77 points. And Magic and Bird had led the way. For Magic in particular, after a year out of the game, the victory had a special kind of meaning.
Living with HIV, never even thinking that I would ever have a chance to play basketball again, and then basketball for the United States. It was therapy for me, and I needed that in the worst way.
And then there was the matter of making sure Michael Jordan knew he was back as well.
Yeah, you hear what the captain said? The captain said, sit down, or this boat is going to sink. That's right, have a seat because you're going to fall, and then that's going to happen. That's the seniority right there. I know it.
With Magic and Michael, there was that little extra something there, you know.
Shit.
Something kind of to prove.
That sucks. I forgot about that. I'm going to stop it. Oh, too. Shit. I'm going to end it. Because they gave me a strike last time.